time to present Scott DuPont to bring you another episode of Finance Your Movie with tips and strategies to help you get your money to tell your story. It's time!
I told you this was going to be a jam-packed season. Once again, we are back with a jam-packed episode. I'm here with Jack Cook, man of many, many hats, filmmaker for many years. Currently, The Private Eye, getting ready to roll into theaters. Welcome, writer-director Jack Cook.
Hey, thank you, Scott, for having me on your show. And I've got my partner might stick her nose in. It's my little puppy. She's
That works. I left out that sometimes producer, band member of Hello Lady, theater actor, yes, and actor as well. And just yes, to if you want a quick recap, I would definitely ask any audience members watching or listening to go back to season 2 and check out episodes 233 and 234, because really that's where Jack Cook got his start, and he hasn't looked back since.
No. Yes.
But let's you and I do a super quick, like 60 seconds recap for the audience. You're in this band, you did theater, you're acting in New York, then you came to LA, and in your bio, you said you started from the bottom up. Elaborate there a little bit, because you weren't really born with a silver spoon and a director's hat, showered with money saying, go direct all these films.
Yes. No, I consider myself kind of like in a working class hero type, where the thing that I have that I'm very proud of, and it's obvious, is work ethic. And so I come from a family of tradesmen. Like my family business from my grandpa, my brother's doing it now, is plumbing, Cook Plumbing, in Cincinnati. And then my dad is a union construction worker, so he builds like bridges, does carpentry, and builds the frames for bridges, etc. So, my dad spends 5 months out of the year up in Alaska building bridges, doing 712s, and he's 67 years old. So it's real. I really loved it when I moved out to Hollywood, and everybody was complaining about how hard their life was. And it's like, well, you don't really have a clue what hard is. And no, so I did start up from the bottom up, and I really appreciate it. I moved out to LA, and I know this story has been told many times, where I moved from New York to LA, and I lived in the back of my truck. I put a cap on the back of my truck for 6 months. I just knew I had to do it. And I'm an Eagle Scout, so camping is not it's not foreign to me at all. So I actually was like showering on the beach of Santa Monica, and living in the back of my truck for 6 months before I finally found a place. And then I started working my way up. And what I mean by working my way up is, you have to make your own luck. I used to crash auditions as an actor. I used to be an actor full time, and I used to crash auditions to, hope to get a role. And I booked a few things by crashing the auditions, and I also did background acting. And a lot of people don't like background acting, and I understand for an actor. I think it's two different beasts, acting as a principal role to a background. I think it's actually bad for an actor to do background, because you learn how to be a robot instead of a person. But I think it's very necessary to get on set. I don't care if it's background or PA. What you understand when you're on these $1 million sets is how $1 million set operates. I'm talking about, the speed, like how they move from location to location, how everything is super organized. And when I was doing background acting, I would always, when everybody else went back to holding, I would stay out there on the set and figure out, oh, what is this guy doing? That's a camera person, or a costume designer, or I would really figure out how these people operate. And I actually made a lot of friends and fellow coworkers by being on set, because the thing is you don't want to fall into the typecast of a background actor, but if you're on set, you're just a normal human being, and people forget that. Like people think, oh, I can't do that, or they get these egos into them, and I
Yeah.
didn't let that affect me, and I just wanted to learn, and and I've gotten a few lines by being on set and not being in holding. I've gotten a few lines when I'm background, and they're like, oh, we'll give you a bump, and can you say this?
Yeah, you
So
never know. You never know.
yeah, and so that's where I came from the bottom up. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really, my trades. The only thing I had was work ethic. And then once you start learning how to utilize the tools, uh, it's very similar to any other business, the movie business. And the only thing is you're using different tools. Instead of using hammers and chisels, we're using cameras and scripts.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got three major films I want to talk to you about. We'll get right into The Private Eye in just a minute. And then I guess you're right in the middle of fundraising for Soul to Squeeze and Bethlehem Glory. But if
That's
you
right.
could real quick, just kind of just a couple minutes, talk about how you got one of your early features made. So
Oh,
you're making the transition from background to actor. Now you're actually doing your first feature. Where did that money come from, or how did that opportunity happen on one of your first features a couple years ago?
well, to try to make this as quick as possible, what I did is I was always auditioning and getting the roles in bit parts where I didn't have a lot of heart attached to it. Because I think everybody when they come out there they want to be the leading role. They want something to sink their teeth into. Let's just say. So I actually wrote The Private Eye so I could star in it, and I wanted to be the lead role, and nobody was giving me the chances. And I always say I always tell people, I wish I knew a director like me when I first moved to Hollywood. So, to give me the chance and to be able to work with a director. So what I did is I wrote The Private Eye in my head at first to be the lead role in it and get the role I wanted. And then as time went on, some producers convinced me like, oh, we need a star actor. And for 8 years, I was developing the script, and I held on to the creativity by uh, transitioning into directing. And so I knew I wanted to direct The Private Eye. I know they wanted a more talented actor, like not talented. They wanted a name
More
actor that's
experience,
worth
maybe?
something. Yeah, and then at first we're trying to raise like $20 million, and every investor, two things came up. The first thing was, well, what have you directed? And and I'm like, well, nothing. That's why I'm trying to make this movie, and that was a big hurdle. And the second thing is, most of the investors I talked to wanted to make a horror film, and the reason why was horror films and comic book movies, they have a built-in audience. They're
Yeah,
horror
yeah.
cons, comic cons. They've got so many people that want to see these genres. So those were the two things I was running into. So what I did actually is I met this guy who's a phenomenal filmmaker in the independent world. His name's O'Sheen, and he had his own Red One. He had a lights, and he had a sound. He had amazing some Ari lights actually, and some nice Kinos,
So
and a
a
boom
decent
mic.
production package there.
Yeah, he did, and he was learning himself, so he actually gave me a super good rate. I mean, I'm talking about I rented all the whole package for 100 a day,
Oh my
everything,
God.
and then so the band you mentioned, Hello Lady, they were my friends from back home in Cincinnati, and they moved out to L.A. and they were my production crew. So like I did in New York City, I studied with George Morrison and Mike Nichols were the master teachers, and I mean, if you know anything about them, they're like EGOTs, Oscar, Grammy, Emmy, Tony. They've won them all. But there's only so much you can learn in a classroom. So this movie I filmed, for the $100 a day and with my friends. I learned more with that than anything, and that was called A Pocket Full of Bullets. And I was the lead actor in it. This may be one of the other reasons why I decided not to act in The Private Eye, because it's so hard to direct and act at the same time. Because if you have millions and millions of dollars, you can go watch every take and redo. But when you're working on, $2,000 to $3,000, it's like we don't have time. And so we shot that movie, A Pocket Full of Bullets, on the weekends. And
True
like we
micro
shot
budget.
very, very small budget, and nothing really. But I learned so much. It was amazing. And like many low budget movies, we haven't even finished post yet, and it's been over 10 years.
Oh
So I
my
mean
God.
that's a learning experience.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and then I moved on to a pilot. Uh, I got offered to direct a pilot, and it was called Shootouts. Phenomenal. And it was this writer producer, and he also acted in Shootouts. But a writer producer who I still work with till this day is named Hope Ayi, and he wrote this Shootouts. And we made this Shootouts movie. We casted the lead female is a woman by the name of KJ Smith, and she's a phenomenal actress. And at the time, her biggest accomplishment was she did 3 episodes of Queen Sugar, but she had the perfect look, perfect acting, perfect style, etc. And we casted her, and that was probably the first or second person where after I worked with her, she blew up, and now she's the lead actress on this TV show called Sisters by Tyler Perry, and it's been on for
Yeah, big
5, 6.
show.
Yeah, so she's the lead actress on that. She's the number one on that. And so just being able to see her through, and Eric Roberts, that was the first time I worked as a director with Eric Roberts, and we became great friends. And that movie it was a pilot. So what I learned about pilots, I stick away from pilots now because pilots are funny. It's not a finished product. Like when you finish a movie, it's a finished product, and you could sell finished products. If you do a pilot, you spend a lot of money, and then you're like, oh, you go around asking for more money,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah, no
just
guarantee. Yeah.
so I actually stick away from pilots now too because it's not a finished product. But those were the first 2 things that got me going as a director, and then I'm still raising money. This is an 8-year process. I'm raising money for the private eye. Can't find it. So I
So
switched gears and I write a
let's backtrack one real quick on the private eye.
yes.
So did I hear you right that a couple of years ago you're trying to raise $20 million?
That was about 9 years ago. Yeah, it went in.
I mean,
And
did you
at
get
first,
laughed out of rooms or just people roll their eyes?
I think that's actually a standard budget. Like I would consider that, like anything under 20 is a low budget movie. So
Now,
I
now
I
are you,
did get.
I just got to stop you for a minute because I want to break this down. Are you pitching this to studios and streamers and networks? Or are you going to individuals looking for $20 million?
Both, and they both said the same thing. The studios like, well, who are you? You know what I mean? And then the investors, especially the ones that have invested in films, are like, who are you? And the ones that didn't invest in films before, they're like, well, what have you done, and how can you guarantee that I'm going to make something back? You could say I don't know if it was laughed out of rooms, but maybe I was just so like deaf and so focused on winning that they probably were laughing at me. I laugh at myself now looking back, but I did have some things going for me. I had 2 actors that were like in my reach that would be well worth $20 million. I mean, one was Julia Roberts, so like I did
Now, was
have.
that through Eric or through another source?
It's through another source, but Eric, I mean, yeah, I mean, Eric, that's his sister, and I mean, that whole family's phenomenal. I mean, Emma Roberts too. Eric's
Yeah.
daughter's bigger than both him and Julia now. But I think I was. You could say that I was getting laughed out of rooms.
So you
But
came to your
I was blind.
senses. You came to your senses. You got this experience. You proved yourself with a bunch of films. You have the budget. I'm guessing you're around $1 million or a little bit less than $1 million, right?
Yeah, and I didn't come to my senses. I think I was just forced. Like the failures you learn from, and I never wanted to like the private eye. The way the private eye came was I switched gears and I forgot about the private eye because not only did people not want to invest in a new film director, people didn't want to invest in a neo noir mystery romance. People wanted action films and horror films. And so I actually wrote A Soul to Squeeze, the other movie we talked about. And I've been working on that movie for 7 years as well. And in the process, I was raising money. I put the private eye on the shelf. I was like, nobody's believing in me with this. I have these connections, but I can't even get to them because they're not even going to blink an eye at me unless I have the $20 million. So I put it on the shelf. I started working on this horror film, raising the money for that, and I had many potential investors, private investors mostly. It was we were working at a deal where it was a studio in India was going to front the money, and we were going to distribute it through a large distribution company, and the distribution company was going to put up in the marketing. But what happened is 2020, March of 2020 happened, and
Yeah, you know
the
that.
the the money pulled out, and they we were like, oh well, in 2 months this is going to be over, and May comes along, and nope, they really pulled out the money, and that I think that company we talked about might have went bankrupt because it just was really
Yeah,
bad with COVID, the movie entertainment industry, because all the movie theaters were shut down. The only people that were very successful were the streaming services, and that's really what jump started streaming services, is people were forced to be at
yeah.
home. So what I did and my team did, instead of giving up, we recalculated it. We were fluid like water, and we adjusted and adapted to the time. And we were like, oh, we've got this we've got this private eye that's on the shelf, you know uh
And you
and at
got
the
it.
time.
I mean, you got it made under $1 million. You got Eric Roberts, Academy Award winner, this really hot comedian, Matt Rife, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
you got yourself a picture. Now, walk me through that process when you circled back to that with a lower budget. Where,
Well, what
how did
happened
you
was
shake the money trees?
what happened was is I had four. There was four individuals that were more hungry than anybody, and we all wanted to make a super big movie. And one was Matt, who you were talking about. So I worked with him on a project that I co-directed, and I was in the editing booth, and I was just amazed by his acting talent. And so when and I was in the editing booth, the editor was saying stuff. Everybody who came in the room really was like, dude, this guy can act. This guy's got something. So I was like, man, he'd be perfect for my directorial debut, like this movie I've been working on so long, The Private Eye. And he was more hungry than everybody else. So Matt, myself, my partners, Elliot Hebler and Hope Ayiyi. Though us four basically used every favor we had, and we just pulled in the little bit of money that we like, and I did these other two movies that I co-directed, and that gave other these investors I've been talking to for years, that gave them confidence enough in me to where they were like, all right, this guy can at least direct, so I'm going to give him a chance.
So
And
you circled back
myself.
to those guys a couple times, and then they finally wrote the
Oh,
checks.
oh well, and that's something I think that's very important for audience members to hear is except for sex, no is a silent yes. Never write anybody off. Like when somebody tells you no, don't write them off.
So,
They're
so
just not.
that's so
They're
true.
afraid themselves.
So true.
They're
Here's my rule. I call this being pleasantly persistent, right? Because
yes.
you don't want to be the sledgehammer who's obnoxious, who's like, oh my God, I will never talk to Scott again. But if you pleasantly and politely, persistently follow up, all I want at the end of the day is a yes or a no. If it's no, that's fine. God bless you, man. We'll
Yeah.
catch you on the next film.
Exactly, and catch you on the next film. Like that's I've asked. I remember one time the first investor for A Soul to Squeeze. I remember we asked him for. I'll just be honest with you. It was at first we're like, oh, 80,000. This is before 2020, and
Now was
actually
was this to be some kind of producer credit? This wasn't just like a
Yeah.
single share.
No, yeah. So we were working with the studio, and they needed so much equity, and all we needed equity wise was 80,000. So we go to the
Okay.
guy and ask him for 80,000, and as my partner does, it's my partner's connection, Elliot, and he goes ask for 80,000, and at the time he's like, no, I can't do it right now. And then a year later, uh, we ask him for like 3 million, and he gives us 100,000. So it's like, he gave us more than we asked to the time before. So it's just like you never know what somebody's going through, and
Yeah,
as long as
timing.
you're not, yeah, don't be an asshole. I think that's
Yeah.
pleasantly persistent is a good way to put it, because you can't just shut people down and say no, and like it shows how badly you want it and how badly you have evolved. If you would
Yeah.
have quit, you would have never been asking that guy for nothing ever again. But since you're asking him again, obviously you've evolved, in some sort of way. So, I always leave. I always come back. You always got to come
Yeah.
back and evolve, and that's what happened with the Private Eye. So it's funny, like the four people I told you about, from like we were planning to shoot in September. In May, it's May. I get the main actor. And when you have a low budget film under a million, what you do is you got to cast the best actor for your lead role, because I'm going to need this guy for 15 days of rehearsal, and I'm also going to need him for 15 to 20 days of shooting at least. So if I had a famous guy, that would have cost me $5 to $10 million.
Yeah, no, that's
And
crazy.
that's probably what Matt would charge now. But at the time, I just hire him because he's the best for the role, and he's the best actor that I knew at the time. And and what you do for these low budget films, the supporting roles, where I only need an actor for 1 to 3 days. That's where you could put a little more money, because it's just less money. So in the beginning, when I made the Private Eye, the supporting roles, if you look at my ensemble cast that I'm working with, I mean, I've got some pretty heavy hitters. But now, when you ask, who's in my movie, and I say Matt Rife, I mean, a majority, I'd say over 80% of the people are starstruck by just his name. And that's a weird feeling, compared to, having to explain who somebody is.
Yeah, he's on fire right now.
Oh,
And
he was number one
your
on
poster looks
Netflix.
phenomenal. So
Oh,
if
thank
you have just a few more minutes, I want to hold you over because I want to get into two other films.
Please.
Okay.